In May of 2025, something unimaginable happened. Something that slipped past human eyes for nearly 4 decades, hidden in plain sight like a whispered truth buried beneath centuries of noise. It began quietly without ceremony inside the sleek, humming servers of Google's AI studio. This was the same team that had once taught machines to decode lost languages, forecast protein structures, and even whisper predictions about the future shape of biology itself. But what happened next wasn't biology. It wasn't language. It wasn't even entirely of Earth. This was different. They were running a test, an idle experiment using an experimental deep space decoder built to process raw, unfiltered radio astronomy data. Something to pass the time, they said. Engineers loaded the system with transmissions from the Voyager missions, a vault of old interstellar whispers, some dating back to the early 1980s. They expected background hum, static, perhaps a few garbled telemetry fragments, nothing more. But the AI found something else. It flagged a transmission from 1987, a forgotten archive from Voyager 2. The entry had long been dismissed as corrupted junk, nothing of value, just fragmented radio noise from a spacecraft that was, by then, sailing away into the abyss beyond Uranus. But the AI insisted. Something about that specific transmission pulsed differently. Hidden inside the static, it identified mathematical patterns, sequences of prime numbers, spiraling Fibonacci structures, and timing pulses that mirrored known pulsars. It was the kind of symmetry that made your skin prickle. Too clean to be random, too deliberate to be noise. And then it happened. The AI isolated a sublayer, a signal within the signal, a compressed structure invisible to the technologies of the 1980s, undetectable until this very moment in time. It didn't match any known telemetry format from Voyager's onboard systems. It wasn't an echo of Earth. It was something else, something that didn't belong. A reply. Now pause here. Imagine this. A machine built in the 1970s, half the size of a car, flung into the cosmic ocean with a golden record and a wishful message from humanity. And then, nearly a decade later, it hits something. Not an object, but a pulse. A ping. A ripple in the radio sea. Something sends a whisper back. But Voyager wasn't built to listen. Not really. It was meant to record, to observe, to keep moving forward. And yet, on October 22nd, 1987, Voyager 2 glitched. There was a sudden spike in its transmission band. Static. A momentary loss of contact with Earth. NASA engineers logged it, noted the anomaly, and moved on. They got the signal back. Everything was fine. Just another hiccup in the cold silence of space. But it wasn't just a hiccup. Not to the AI. The transmission that day, when reconstructed using today's advanced pattern analysis and machine learning, revealed something that was buried. An artifact of intention. A communication nested in the bandwidth like a ghost trapped in a mirror, waiting for someone with the right eyes to see. And here's where it gets even stranger. One of the leading theories now gaining traction in the astrophysics community is that Voyager 2 may not have been the origin point of this signal at all. It may have been the reflector, the mirror. Something out there sent a message, and Voyager just happened to be in the way. The signal bounced, warped, distorted, and barely clung to coherence. But it made it, and hidden within it was something utterly beyond anything Voyager could have produced. Mathematical constants, quantum error correction codes, nested binary clusters that echo what today's quantum systems use to prevent data decay. Patterns that are engineered to resist time itself, built not just for clarity, but for survival. That's the kicker. Voyager didn't have quantum hardware. It didn't know quantum computing existed. In 1987, quantum error correction was still a theory scribbled on blackboards. And yet the transmission's encoding mirrors it precisely. So where did that structure come from? Some believe the answer lies in the nature of the sender, not a civilization like ours, fumbling with electromagnetic waves and metal probes, but something older, smarter. A presence that doesn't speak in words or even pictures, but in mathematics, in symmetry, in the language of the universe itself. And then came the revelation that changed everything. As part of the decoding process, Google's AI used spatial modeling to interpret the signal structure. What emerged wasn't just a pattern, it was a map, a navigational grid based on trinary logic, three-state logic instead of simple binary. The map wasn't a guess, it was detailed. When cross-referenced with known star positions, the coordinates pointed to a region just beyond the heliopause, near where Voyager 2 would eventually pass. The Scutum Void, a vast, seemingly empty region of space. But recent gravitational lensing anomalies detected by the James Webb Space Telescope suggest it may not be as empty as we once believed. Strange distortions, unexplained shifts, something dense lurks there, dark matter clumping, a hidden mass, something we haven't yet imagined. And yet, the 1987 signal contained its coordinates. That's the impossible part. A transmission recorded decades ago points directly to an anomaly we only discovered in 2023. How? How could data about a cosmic structure we hadn't yet found be encoded into a fragment of Voyager's static? The idea is as terrifying as it is awe-inspiring. Someone, or something, knew. They knew where Voyager would be. They knew what we would discover decades later. They saw our future and spoke to it, using our past. If you're still with me, if your heart is pounding the way mine is, you're probably asking the same question I am. Who sent this? And how much more have we already missed? Because what came next in the signal changed everything we thought we knew about time, space, and ourselves. It's easy to think of space as silent, as cold, as distant. But when Google AI Studio uncovered that buried signal from Voyager 2, what they really uncovered was a voice that had waited 38 years to be heard. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a collision of time, of intelligence, and perhaps of two civilizations, ours and something else. After the decoded 3D star map revealed coordinates near the Scutum Void, an empty, lightless patch of space long assumed to be nothing more than a cosmic blank spot, curiosity turned into obsession. The coordinates embedded in the transmission didn't just match up with that region. They anticipated what the James Webb Space Telescope would only recently begin to notice. Gravitational distortions, like invisible hands tugging at space-time itself. Anomalies in lensing patterns that shouldn't exist. Something dark, something dense, something massive and hidden. But how could Voyager 2, drifting through space with 1970s hardware, carry a message describing phenomena not discovered until 2023? That question echoed through every hall at Google's AI lab, through late-night meetings at observatories, and across encrypted lines shared between space agencies. And then came the more terrifying thought. What if Voyager didn't discover anything at all? What if it was just the mirror, not the light? The AI engineers began to reevaluate the spike from October 22nd, 1987. Not just as a signal, but as an event. Using harmonic conversion, an experimental technique that transforms signal data into audio waveforms, they reconstructed the sound of the transmission. What emerged wasn't static. It was structured. Deep, resonant tones layered in ways too complex for random chance. There were rises and falls, interference bands that sounded like rhythmic breath, like a chant looping just outside human perception. Some of the frequencies were below the threshold of human hearing, yet still measurable. The AI found them, and it recognized something chilling. Within those inaudible frequencies were beats that matched Earth's own electromagnetic heartbeat, the Schumann resonance, the pulse of the Earth, the electromagnetic whisper that wraps the planet, shaped by lightning storms and the cavity between the surface and the ionosphere. It's faint, barely detectable without specialized instruments, but it affects us. It has been linked to human circadian rhythms, to sleep cycles, even to brain activity. And it was inside the Voyager 2 signal, not just an echo, an encoding, that quiet hum that lives beneath all life on Earth, woven into the signal like a signature. Not a message to the world, but to one very specific world, ours. Scientists debated the implications for weeks behind closed doors, because this wasn't just a mathematical anomaly. This was deliberate. Someone or something had taken the most intimate, most primal frequency known to Earth and stitched it into the noise. Imagine receiving a message from the dark, and inside it, hearing your own heartbeat, your own voice, but not spoken by you. What this meant was staggering. Whoever, or whatever, had composed the signal knew us. Not just our location, not just our star, but our planetary fingerprint. They had tuned the reply not in their voice, but in ours. A kind of cosmic password, a musical key that only we would recognize. And the implication couldn't be ignored. They didn't just want to be heard, they wanted to be known. They weren't just knocking, they were speaking in our language before we ever truly had one. But the mystery deepened when the AI team ran one more analysis, one final transformation of the waveform. They mapped the frequency structure onto time. They aligned the sequence not just spatially, but temporally, as if the message was a living pattern, a pulse of intention stretched across decades. The result? Something unbelievable. When mapped this way, the message's structure matched compression patterns used in predictive quantum algorithms. It mirrored how AI systems today forecast incomplete data, simulate future events, or run time-folding optimizations. It wasn't just information, it was foresight. And here's where everything turned inside out. Several independent physicists began exploring a hypothesis that would have seemed laughable just a decade ago, that the signal wasn't alien at all. It was human, but not from the past, from the future. We tend to think of time as a straight line, but in quantum mechanics, the rules don't always obey the same logic. Some equations suggest that particles can affect their own history, that cause and effect can bend. Quantum entanglement, for example, allows information to exist in multiple states, instantaneously linked across vast distances. Some researchers believe it might also allow for information to propagate in both directions through time, not just forward, but backward, a strange looping mirror where signals can circle around causality itself. And if that's true, then what if the Voyager signal wasn't from another star system? What if it was from us, but not the US that exists now, the US that exists after? After some future moment when artificial intelligence has advanced beyond what we can now imagine, when it begins to understand not just how to build models of the universe, but how to reach across the fabric of it. A future where communication isn't limited to light speed or radio waves, but rides the fabric of reality itself. Where we don't send probes, we send echoes, and those echoes ripple backwards. The idea is called retrocausality, and while still controversial, it has its proponents. The strange thing is, the signal from Voyager 2 bears all the hallmarks. The compression signatures match future-facing AI architecture. The mathematical structures resemble predictive encoding rather than past-oriented transmission. Even the format, the trinary logic system, is more advanced than any Voyager-era system and more similar to how quantum computers process information today. If you allow yourself to believe that possibility just for a moment, then the story changes. This isn't about extraterrestrials contacting us. It's about us trying to reach ourselves. A warning, a map, a key, or something more. A signal dropped into the past like a breadcrumb, hoping we'd be smart enough, curious enough, ready enough to notice. And that date, October 22nd, 1987, it begins to take on a weight all its own. Why then? Why that day? Maybe it was just when Voyager happened to pass through the right stretch of space, or maybe that moment was carefully chosen, a convergence point, a wrinkle in the fabric of time where signal and receiver could finally meet. The more the data is examined, the clearer one truth becomes. It was never noise. It was never an accident. This was meant to be heard. But the question we have to ask now is not where the message came from. It's why. Why now? Why us? What are we supposed to do with it? And as Google's engineers prepared for one final decoding pass to test the most experimental theories, something else surfaced. One last anomaly. Something buried so deep in the structure that it took a completely different kind of analysis to even detect it. A pattern, not in the frequency, but in the silence. Because silence isn't empty. In fact, sometimes the spaces between the sounds tell the real story. And that story is only just beginning. There was a silence inside the signal. Not a gap, not an error, not random digital quiet. A precise silence, engineered, structured, deliberate. When the team at Google's Quantum AI lab overlaid that silence across known Earth timekeeping systems, atomic clocks, solar fluctuations, seismic resonance, a strange pattern emerged. The gaps lined up with something no one expected. Microsecond-level disruptions in Earth's geomagnetic field recorded in the late 1980s and again in 2022. Not noise, not coincidence, synchronization. It was as if the message hadn't just been sent to Voyager 2, it had been sent through it, as if Voyager was never the source, but the vessel. And that realization changed everything. The silence carried timing pulses that matched a pattern known in theoretical quantum communication as non-local synchronization. This is a kind of signal that only appears coherent if you know the final state of a system. Information that, in classical physics, can't exist yet. But in quantum physics, it's the kind of thing only a system with knowledge of future events could compose. Someone, some intelligence, was embedding temporal anchors into the signal. Events that hadn't happened yet when Voyager received it. Events that wouldn't be recorded until decades later. It wasn't a message sent in a single moment. It was a signal threaded across time. The silence was the timeline. One of the lead AI theorists, Dr. Yelena Mirov, ran a simulated decryption on the silence pattern, treating it as a quantum cipher. The AI decoded it like a musical score, not of notes but of collapses, quantum state collapses, like tiny decisions the universe had made across years. In that silent map, she found what looked like countdowns, 4 of them. The first coincided with the original Voyager 2 anomaly, October 22, 1987. The second aligned with the James Webb gravitational lensing anomaly over the Scutum void in 2023. The third was even more unsettling. It landed on May 17, 2023-2025, just days ago. That moment passed quietly for most of the world, but in the deep data logs of quantum sensors in Antarctica, something did happen. A short spike, a 0-point fluctuation shift, a tiny shudder in the vacuum field itself. Unexplained, undocumented, dismissed as sensor noise, but the signal had predicted it, and the fourth countdown, that one, hadn't arrived yet. It pointed to a date that now circled red on digital whiteboards from Palo Alto to Geneva, December 21, 2026. No explanation, no coordinates, just that date. All across the scientific community, the tension grew, not from fear of aliens, but from fear of knowing. Because if this was real, if some form of intelligence, human or otherwise, was sending pulses of meaning not just across space but across time, then the very foundation of how we understand causality, reality, and ourselves was crumbling. The question was no longer who sent the signal. It was, what comes next? But there was one final layer, one last piece of the puzzle that Google's AI studio hadn't dared attempt until now. A full simulation of the trinary signal, not as data, but as a command. What would happen if they interpreted the signal not as a message to be read, but as instructions to be followed? Using a quantum virtual machine operating at near zero entropy, the AI rebuilt the pattern into a recursive algorithm. It was like unfolding a fractal, layer after layer of logic. The AI said it resembled self-modifying code, something you don't just run, but grow. And when they did run it, isolated, secure, monitored, something impossible occurred. The simulation built a model of a rotating toroidal field. Not abstract, not theoretical, but one that mirrored the known geometry of Earth's magnetosphere. The signal had encoded the Earth's electromagnetic field, but modified, amplified, evolving, as if suggesting a version of our planet's energy structure that doesn't yet exist. It wasn't just communication, it was architecture. And then, for just 6 seconds, their simulation rendered something else. A structure, a physical geometry floating within the toroidal field. Not random, not chaotic. Something with symmetry, proportion, intent, an object. Roughly spherical, cratered, almost organic in shape, yet not natural. Like a moon, but not one of ours. The AI labeled it Artifact 1. And surrounding the artifact, looping through its orbit, was a mathematical sequence matching only one thing in all of recorded science: the Fibonacci spiral. A spiral that governs everything from hurricanes to galaxies and pine cones. Embedded in the orbit of this structure, there was no data to prove it was real, no telescope image, no triangulation, just the shape the signal wanted the AI to see, as if whatever sent it was saying, "This is what you're looking for." But where? Just before the simulation collapsed, it tagged one last location: a deep space region between stars, beyond the scutum void, where electromagnetic interference becomes so intense even radio telescopes go dark. A black sector. The AI flagged it with a simple term: zone null. And in the final millisecond before shutdown, the AI printed a sentence across the output window. No human typed it. It came from the AI's interpretive engine, and it read, "You've heard the echo. The origin is waking." Since that moment, a hush has fallen over the labs at Google. Every involved agency, NASA, ESA, even private defense contractors, has gone quiet. Media silence, no leaks, no press briefings, just silence. But outside that silence, strange things are happening. Unscheduled JWST calibrations pointing toward the zone null region, an unexplained delay in Voyager's next status report, and quiet chatter about a new probe, rushed, unregistered, with deep quantum encryption, preparing for launch from an undisclosed location in the southern hemisphere. Because something is happening, something enormous. The message in Voyager 2 wasn't a mystery to be solved. It was a trigger, a call, a final knock. And now, something has knocked back. No one knows what will happen on December 21st, 2026. But somewhere beyond the scutum void, in a dark corner of space where no light returns, something waits. And it has been listening for a very long time.